everybody. I hope you're having a great day today. I am doing okay. Life gives us these up and downs of all kinds of things. Some days we're just hanging by a thread, other days we're doing good, and other days we're hopefully flying really high and happy and joyful. And that's what we're going to try and help you do today. Get closer to that as our goal, help you get unstuck, live happy and free. And I'm your host, Rick, and I'm going to be taking you through this episode. As with all the other podcasts, please check out previous episodes, share these with your friends and on your social, because anybody can use a bit of help, tips, advice, or just shared life experience from our great guests that are on of how they got out of a bad situation when they felt they were stuck in a deep rut. And they do lots of really interesting things to try and accomplish that. Some of them turn it into a business. So we talked to them about that too and how they can help other people. Please do check out the links down below in the podcast and support places like Studio 17 Designs. If you go to redbubble.com and you just search Studio 17 Designs, that's with the number 17 in the middle and the Z at the end. They've got some great inspirational quotes on shirts and mouse pads and mugs and great Christmas holiday gifts. They got funny Halloween stuff, but it's all uplifting material to remind you on a daily basis or anytime you look up from your desk or whatever it is and you see that thing you got from them, and it helps you to keep going. It motivates you to not quit and not give up. So we do like supporting Studio 17 Designs on redbubble.com. And we love to support our guests, and we've got one here waiting. So I'm going to get them right in the room now. This is not a kids show. So if you got some kids in the room, you might want to shush them out because I will be cursing. We're adults here talking about adult things and just trying to get through life. So let's get right to it. I'm going to go ahead right now and let our guest come on board. I'm really glad that he is with us today. And as always, I just try and take a brief look at our guest bio. What's important to me is they're humans just like you and me and all of our listeners out there. They've had their ups and downs in life, and it's great that they come on board and are open about sharing about those things and what the heck they did to try and get out of it. So I will let our guest introduce himself. Tell us your name and where you're from, and actually, what do you do?
Hi, Rick. My name is Thomas Green, and I am director of a company named Ethical Marketing Service. I also have a podcast, and it's named the Thomas Green Podcast originally.
Excellent.
And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
You know already from the show, this is all about helping people, get unstuck, hopefully live happy and free, how they really want to. And that's a lofty goal for all of us. We know it's really damn hard to accomplish. Some of us are lucky enough to, get through things that teach us things, and then we use that to, help others or teach others or do things the right way. Sounds like you do with your business, and we'll certainly talk about your business in detail too, and hopefully how that can help out some of our listeners. But for yourself personally, I always start out with this question for folks. What are any of the times for yourself? Maybe it was a personal thing, maybe it's a business thing. Who knows? We all face all kinds of things in life. But for you, what comes to mind when when I ask, well, when in life were you just ready to quit? When were you done? When were you like at the end of your rope and didn't know what to do? And ultimately, what helped you make that better? Because hopefully that experience can help some of our listeners out there who are feeling not in a good place at the moment.
In terms of what makes things better, or what I've learned recently, which would perhaps make things better for people,
Mm-hmm.
a quote springs to mind, which is "Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so." Um,
Yeah.
And I'm not, when I first heard that quote, I was like, well, surely there are some things which are objectively bad. But I
Mm-hmm.
do think that the majority of what people tend to struggle or suffer with, it can be interpreted differently by someone else. So
Absolutely.
We have opinions about ourselves, and we act on them very convincingly. But it can be the case, like I said, that you can have one situation which might be considered bad, which someone else would react completely different to. And the question which I found interesting was, where do we develop these opinions about ourselves?
Mm,
And I think maybe not all, but at least a significant percentage come from early life experiences.
yeah.
How we are treated early in our life affects the way that we see ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, if you're in that particular scenario where you're maybe giving yourself a hard time, a good question is, what early experiences did you have that might have contributed to the way that you view and you feel about yourself?
Mm-hmm.
So, does anything spring to mind for you there?
Yeah, I mean, with all of our guests, it's just always great to hear, people talk about what has helped them, what self-examination they've done, what early childhood experiences shaped them, or that they needed to revisit, or to process, and now with an adult, through an adult looking glass, to understand those things and not have them reap the negative consequences that maybe they have had for most of their life. Um, so when you talk about looking at things through a different lens, and that quote, my struggle personally is always, I can, we can all read as many self-help books or listen to a podcast like this, or read some quotes, and as true as those things are, and especially the things that stick around for a long time, such as looking at the glass half empty or half full. I mean, it's just what you say, two people looking at the same thing but with a different perspective, right, in a different way. Or me looking at the great place I described of the UK, and you saying, oh, that's not how I see it, or where I'm thinking, right? So it's a perfect example. And I'm curious for yourself, when you find yourself in a situation where you're looking at it in a more negative way, right, or it's bringing you down, or you feel stuck about a situation, um, is there anything that you do or have done in the past that was helpful in turning that perspective around to the opposite side?
Well, there are some ways of thinking which are unhelpful, and you can sort of check yourself on whether or not you fall into this category.
Mm,
So there are negative filters, so discounting the positives and only emphasizing what's happened that's negative. And
mm.
perhaps I might be guilty of that when looking at the UK. You never know.
We all are.
Predicting certain negative outcomes based on your
Mm,
interpretation. So
mm,
this happened, and therefore what will happen is this, when we don't actually know that will be the case.
yeah, that's a big one.
Not seeing things in proper proportion. So the old phrase of not making a mountain, or not
Mm,
making a molehill out of a mountain, or
yeah,
whatever
right. Yep.
that phrase is. Appealing to emotion. So because I feel a certain way, that therefore that makes me correct. Like I should feel this way because my emotions tell me I should. I
That's
see a lot of people
interesting.
use this one, which is inaccurate language. And what I mean by that is like universals. I never do this, or I
Right.
always do that.
Yeah.
So if you're using those, then it's sort of might be a red flag for you.
Hmm.
Black or white thinking.
Hmm.
And generalizations. So generalization might be, my life sucks right now. When if you were to examine the various different sections of your life, it might be the case that certain areas aren't quite what you want, but other areas are exactly,
Yeah.
just fine, or they might be
Right.
okay. And so generalizations, I feel like a lot of people do that as well.
Yeah. Well, either you're just well researched or you've got some great experience. But those are, it's a great just list of things that you just rattled off there. And one thing that comes up a lot, when I'm just chatting with people, off of the show or sometimes on the show as well, is, like you said, talking about, early experiences and how they end up, looking at themselves, because it's how you view the entire world, right? But, with your own thoughts, or like you say, how you either think about yourself or about the situation. And I literally will throw, if I feel like I'm getting stuck in that rut or that routine, I'll literally, throw up my, list of, okay, here's what to do at this moment, just like the list that you just ran through.
Mm,
That's a great kind of toolkit for people to read, through that list and ask yourself those questions like, okay, will this matter in 5 years from now? Am I generalizing about this? Is it true that this always happens to me? Like, okay. And sometimes I tell people, literally just start writing everything down, whether it's journalized or whether it's a calendar, however the hell you want to do it. And when you're thinking everything is really crappy and going bad all the time, write down what those things are, so that, you, whatever it is, I got into an argument with my boss, right? Or my mother, or whatever it is, right? You write down the day that happened, right? And, write it down the next time it happens. And at the end of the month, look back at that calendar, or look back at the notes of how many times you wrote these things down. And and say to yourself, you have to be honest with yourself, and you say, well, God, I always tell everybody that, like, I'm fucking fighting every day with my whoever, my mom, let's say. But you know what? I look at the calendar here, and it only happened 8 times this month. So, God, why do I keep, having this, negative, overgeneralized attitude that I have a terrible relationship with that person, or that I'm fighting all the time with them? No, you fought 8 days out of 30 days. That's not even 50% of the time. So it's not even half of the time, right? And sometimes we got to kind of knock ourselves on the head and really see things for what they are, because it's hard to have that objective look at reality when you're kind of stuck in the thick of it, right?
I have heard journaling to be good
Mm,
from the other perspective as well, from the point of view of, I always feel, I've noticed that I always feel rotten on a Wednesday or something, and then
mm,
they look at what the trends are of every
mm,
Wednesday, and it turns out they've been meeting with a particular person, and they're aware that that particular person is particularly negative, and
mhm.
therefore, they're now they have an answer as to why they don't feel quite as good on that particular day.
Yeah, that's a great point. I always, say to people that you have to, if you want to really figure out, what the problems are, and try to get to the root of things that you feel are constantly a problem, then whether you like it or not, you kind of have to treat yourself and your life as, or your life for the time being, as like a mini science experiment, and do just what you said. I mean, that's a great example there, because you have to, you've got to record the information, you got to record, what you're doing that day, and like you say, you can then see the trends or the patterns, and you say, fuck, no wonder every Saturday morning I feel like this, because I didn't realize that, every Friday I have to do this thing, and I'm really stressed out after that. And
Mm,
so now I realize that. So, you know what? Maybe Friday, nighttime is when I should schedule my workout at the gym, because I can get out all that stress or frustration that happens on Friday. And I didn't really realize that. And then I have to write down again, starting the next month, how do I feel on Saturday mornings now? Has that changed? Has that made a difference? And, you can only change one thing at a time, so that if that is the thing that was the cause of the problem or not. And, it's kind of a pain in the butt, but, it's up to you if you want to figure out, the problems that can make your life better. It's unfortunately, something that's necessary, because nobody's going to do it for us, right, Thomas?
well, I think there are some people that might help you along
Yeah,
the way, and I
true.
do encourage that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But ultimately, if the best information in the world, if you don't want there to be change, then exactly what it is that you said is that nothing will change. Things
Yeah.
will only change if you change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, I try not to see too much of information from the guests before they come on because I just, I love to be, informed as we're chatting and asking them things. And a big topic that always comes up for people is, how the rest of the world is seeing them versus how do they see themselves, and trying to keep up appearances or keep up the Instagram, highlight reel, of the great life, when everybody, I think, instinctively knows social media in general is not a positive reinforcement for, for the majority of people in life. Instead, it does what American advertising does. It just ups the ante of how like incredible and great your life should be, or the materialistic things that you should have, and then you'll be happy, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not a fan of that at all. And people, unfortunately, a lot of people, it's just what they're bombarded with. And maybe they haven't had strong role models to say, well, think about what makes you happy or what's really important, as opposed to making sure you have the same car that your neighbor has, or that your house is as big as this person or whatever. Because we all know the millions of people who are super rich or famous and they kill themselves, or they're sitting in their house alone crying because their dad never said they loved them, or whatever the issues might be, which are terrible. So the people who come on the show a lot of times talk about not watching the news as much, because you get all that negative stuff there, or limiting your how much you're perusing social media. And God, I mean, even countries like China, are now limiting the amount of time users can be on certain apps a day. And I don't really have an opinion one way or the other about, good, bad, or otherwise, because it's just like anything. If you use it in the wrong way, any tool can end up being a bad thing or can end up being a good thing. So I don't necessarily think it's the tools that cause the problem. It's us as humans, unfortunately, and we're far from perfect, but I hope we can help each other out. um, and I've, for the businesses and the entrepreneur things that I do, I'm heavy on social media. And sometimes I have kind of an inner conflict with myself. Like, am I contributing to, that, same problem? Or can I use this tool in a better way? And you, with your ethical marketing, company, that's the name of it. And I know that, you've got all the social accounts, to communicate with people from TikTok to Instagram and so on. It's the same as I. So I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts, number one, on, and they might be two different thoughts. It might be, from a personal standpoint, and it might be from a business standpoint, because, all those platforms can be used for different things. So I'm just curious how you help people with your company, to market their business or market whatever it is that they're trying to get the word out about, in an ethical, good way that hopefully isn't, bringing anybody down in some way.
Um, well, there's a few different ways to answer that one. In terms of how we help, it's typically the summary of it is to get them more customers. So
Mhm,
digital marketing. How we do it in an ethical way is to only work with certain kinds of businesses that aren't doing something which is detrimental to, should we
mhm,
say, the community,
mhm,
and also be careful about your claims,
mhm,
which is
mhm.
very, I don't know. It should be more like that, in my opinion, in terms of you need to be careful about what you're claiming. So we
Right.
wouldn't necessarily say something untrue. I think that's the main problem of what you were referring to about how people show what their life is when it's actually not true. So
Mhm,
telling the truth, I think, is a big one online. And in terms of whether it's good or bad for people and how they should use it, in my view, I think you should be outcome orientated. So,
mhm,
from a personal perspective, I
mhm,
typically only use YouTube, and the reason I only use YouTube is because the learning side of it, so I can get the
Yeah.
most learning from YouTube. I don't use any of the other ones because
Mm,
my outcome is to learn as much as I can do. And I
mm,
feel like if young people are, let's say, you spending a lot of their time on social, and it's, I don't know, changing who they are as a person, and then they're wasting all of their youth essentially, is because they don't have an outcome for it. So if they were learning something on socials, or I don't know, making friends, legitimate friends or something, then I
right.
would see it as not a negative thing. But since
Mm,
it's essentially a drain of, it's not producing anything productive for them, they don't have an outcome for it, and therefore it's perceived as a negative thing. I guess
yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
answer I would give them.
Yeah. Because, I mean, like I say, all tools can be used, for positive or negative. And, it's like somebody who, they're a junior entomologist. They're into bugs and, collecting bugs and displaying them and categorizing, what they are and all of that stuff. But, nobody that they know does that, or the friends that they have or the people around them, pick on them for that, right? Or say, that they're nerdy or they're not cool for doing that or whatever. And yet on social media, they find a group of people who, post photos like that, who do like that, and end up becoming, true scientists, entomologists, studying, that part of nature and all of that. And this person loves it and they fit right in, right? So social
Mm.
media, in a sense, that's great for them. That's what gave them the confidence to move forward and not do something that they really didn't want to do, but they felt forced into it because this thing wasn't cool, or everybody picked on them about it. But now they found like-minded people that they could say, hey, it's okay to like bugs and want to be an entomologist instead of a whatever else that my parents are trying to force me to do, or all my friends think I should do. So I think social media can be a perfect thing, to
Is
help
this
people
your
for
way of
that.
telling me that you like bugs? Really?
Yes, yes. I actually I've eaten a bunch of bugs in different countries. I always travel as much as I possibly can, and yeah, I throw myself right into it. So I've chowed down on garlic cockroaches, on salted ants, and I don't mean like going to France, although I've been there and had chocolate covered grasshoppers or whatever, but I mean like the real deal stuff in nature. It's always interesting to try new stuff, especially when you eat like maggots and things that you would never think you would eat. But I think adventure is a really critical thing to keeping yourself unstuck doing different things. Um, so actually, that leads me to another question. Do you ever need to force yourself into different routines, or to go and do something so that you don't feel like, oh, this is the same thing every day and I'm just, kind of trudging away here at work? Or are you one of the lucky ones that like every day you're excited to get up because you're going to work with a new client, or, you're going to go try that new restaurant, or whatever? I don't know. But how you do that.
I'm certainly not. I don't get excited to get out of bed every day. That's for
Ah,
sure.
okay, so
Um,
that's great. You're just like everybody else.
in terms of the comfort zone
Mhm,
question, or part of the question, I don't mind trying new things. So I think there's a trait that they recognized in entrepreneurs, and that is that they're willing to take action whether they're certain of the outcome or not. And there's also a phrase, or a quote, I think it was Tim Ferriss, and the quote is to test your assumptions. So maybe you have assumptions about the way that something will turn out, or an opinion on something. And
mhm,
I think you said regarding journaling to be sort of a scientist. And if
mhm,
you were to test your assumption in the, let's say, doing something different, let's say I have an assumption about a particular restaurant, well, go test it, see whether or not your assumption is correct, and you can apply that to anything that you're nervous about or anything new.
mhm.
um, because then you're not invested, you're just seeing what the outcome will be.
So have you ever had a time in life where, like you say, you're not always excited to get up? Is that, hey, hello, me too, everybody else, obviously. Um, Have you ever had a time in life where you have basically had to do something where you said, I just, I need to change whatever, you might not have even known what it was. But looking back on anything or any turning points that made you say, well, I didn't realize it then, but I ended up, going a totally different direction. And, maybe that was good or bad, or at least I've learned this. Because I think one thing that people are afraid of, obviously, is, jumping off the deep end, and you don't know what it's going to like what it'll be like if you quit your job. You have to pay your bills, or you don't know what's going to be like if you and a friendship because they're being abusive, and you've tried to make it right, but it's time to end it. You don't, you're scared. Well, I have another good friend, and it's pretty easy for us to accept. um I don't say accept painful things, but accept things that aren't so great because we don't know if there's anything better or not. And I can sit here and say, that's a terrible way to live. We should all be so brave, and we should just freaking go and do, something else, or try something else, or change the situation. Because, what a way to live in, as that quote says, most men live in, in quiet suffering or something like that, because they're not willing to try something different, out of the fear of the unknown. Um, and I've have reached points in my life where I have totally changed my life, where I've moved to another country, where I've sold my home, where I've sold everything I've owned and just only have a suitcase, and getting rid of 20 years of your life down to a suitcase, and giving everything away and selling everything, whatever, and leaving forever, quote unquote, for years, and just going to one place and saying, I have no idea what the future is going to be. I have no idea if I can do this or what it will be like in this other place. But I know I'm I don't want to continue how it is here. So maybe not so drastically for yourself, but were there times looking back where you said, gee, I got to do something. And you did change something?
Many.
Ah, okay, great. Well, I'd love to hear that list, like you rattled off the first self-help list.
Well, I suppose what would I mean? I've done lots of different things in my life.
Mhm.
In terms of when I was younger, I used to change what I did frequently because I was constantly looking for that thing that was going to quote unquote make me happy.
Yeah, we
Um,
all do that.
but in terms of like helping in relation to that topic,
Mhm.
it's to define what it is that you're afraid of.
Mm,
Because if you don't define it, then it seems bigger,
mm,
um, but you're not as afraid of as many things as you think you are,
mm.
and you're often braver than you are aware of. So there's less to the problem than you thought there was. And so what you would do is break the problems down into smaller steps or smaller problems, and then figure out how you will approach those smaller problems. So that is typically how I'd go about tackling that issue of, I don't know if I want to continue doing that, um,
And
and
these
I
are
don't know
great.
how to move forward.
These are great practical, um, steps to do, and pieces of advice. I'm just curious. I mean, how is it that you seem to know these well? Because we'll have people on the show. They might be a life coach, or they might be uh, a therapist, or whatever. But it's something that they do all the time. So it's kind of like in their head. They've already got here's the 10 things I tell people to do. But you run like a marketing marketing company, so I'm just curious how you have such quick access to such good advice, because it's great advice.
Well, thank you for that. But it comes out of a lack more than anything. So,
Mhm.
and one of the things actually, which I did prep for for our conversation today,
Yeah. Okay.
but if I was to summarize it, of let's say you're feeling like you're stuck, you want to get unstuck, and you want to live a happy life. Well, one of the principles that you can do, which is what I've done, is to be always looking for that thing which is going to help you. So there's things that I wanted to share with you today, but at the same time, if you have that principle and you have access to, let's say, the internet, then as long as you continue looking for that thing, whether it be on podcasts or whether it be articles, etc., then you'll find it eventually. Then you'll find the thing which is going to make you get out of that rut or make you feel better.
Yeah, I think for sure that's something I always say. Just you can only guarantee. I mean, there's nothing you can guarantee, but the one thing you can guarantee is that nothing will change or get better if you stop, or if you quit, or you give up, or you stop looking, just like you say. So if you don't do anything about it, then yes, you can guarantee that nothing's going to change. And that goes to that quote of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome, which I couldn't agree with more. So that leads me to something that a lot of people talk about, and that is finding something that is meaningful to them in life, or passionate. They are looking, and they find something, whether that's in their line of work, whether that's a hobby, whether that's, I mean, hell, doing these podcasts. I mean, although I've been on FM radio as a talk radio host, doing these podcasts is, it's like free self-help for everybody and myself. It's like self-therapy. So it's like, for some people, just starting a podcast about whatever it is that you love doing, cooking, or and you don't get the opportunity to do that much because you work at a different kind of job that you really fucking hate, but you can now come home, and every Saturday it's 3 hours of talking on a podcast about something that you love.
Mm.
So I'm just curious for yourself, how I don't know if this is the case for you, that your work happens to be something that helps to motivate you, or obviously it's your company, it's your business, so you must be, I would think, passionate about it, and want to continue doing it. But what is it about your work that does help to motivate you, or keep you going? And tell us a little bit more about what you do for people, because just literally helping people, right? That broad term, and as we all know, helping others definitely makes you feel good, as a beneficial for you, a thing for yourself. And you'd be helping people with marketing services, you could be helping people as a fireman, you could be helping people in lots of different ways, right? So I'm just curious, how your line of work plays into all this.
Well, I 100% on the same page with you in terms of you should be focusing on as much meaning as possible. So, what's meaningful to you about what you're doing? And if you have a lack of meaning in your life, then most likely you're going to be unhappy or eventually unsatisfied with that. In
Mhm.
terms of how I apply meaning to my everyday life or my work life, is that we as a company, we sponsor children in underdeveloped countries.
Mm,
So that's with education, food, and clean water.
mhm,
And so if ever I am in the place where I'm like, I really don't want to go to work today, then there are some people who are significantly worse off than I am who need me to go into work.
That's great.
And then also job creation. So I have employees, and if I decide to not do my business anymore, it's no longer just myself that is going to be affected. It will
Mm,
also be the livelihoods of other people.
mm,
And so, I mean, that's where I find the most meaning in what I do. In terms of doing a good job for people, I do think that it's beneficial for me to be doing what I'm doing, because there are an awful lot of people in my industry who don't tell the truth or are detrimental to businesses.
mhm,
There are a lot of agencies out there who are not very ethical, hence the company name.
mhm.
And I do think that us being in that business is a good thing, but I never found that meaningful enough to to really kind of get me going. So those initial two things were the things that really drive me.
Wow, that's it's great to hear that, because I I will say recently, as of a few hours ago, I'm literally helping some kids get back into school who live on the street and don't have parents and all of that. And so, having things that are bigger than yourself, I think is hugely beneficial. It's really just, it's great to hear you say that, what you guys do with, the revenue or some of the revenue that comes into your company. And by the way, for folks who, would love to get in touch with somebody who does some ethical work when it comes to marketing, digital marketing, how can they get in touch with you? What's your website and so on? Any ways that they can get in touch?
Website is ethicalmarketingservice.co.uk.
.co.uk.
Yeah, we
Right.
got the .com as well, but
Oh,
either one
okay.
is fine.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it's great that you're paying it forward, or finding something bigger than yourself in order to contribute. So with marketing actually is something that I've had to do a lot of for different industries, and still continue to do. So actually, I'm just curious, and this is so you can plug your business and what you guys do as well. If somebody comes to you and they say, well, I need some digital marketing, and let's say it's a middle of the road person, they're not a total novice at it. They've done some of it, they have their they've run their Facebook ads and those kind of things, the typical online things, Instagram ad or maybe Pinterest advertising or something, um, and they're coming to you. And I guess it's better I let you maybe pick a small to medium enterprise and how you guys can potentially help somebody like that.
Well, initially, some people will have an idea of what they want, in which case we will just, do the best that we can on that particular media. But some will sort of ask, where's the best place for us to go, or to get our clients, and it depends what business they're in. So we don't necessarily specialize in a particular type of business, but I mean, it would typically be, it will be a conversation around how whereabouts their clients are. So where can we get in front of the right people, and then that's where we'd focus
And what got
our
you in?
efforts.
What got you into marketing? Marketing was a double major of mine in college, and I was just fascinated by the psychology part of it, because buying and selling, I mean, it is all just psychology. Um, so I mean, how did you get into marketing? Were you in something totally different and you wanted to make a change, or how did it come about?
I used to work for a big corporate,
Mm,
and then just started taking courses, a lot of self-development stuff and some marketing stuff.
hmm.
Um, I think mainly, again, as a from a point of lack. So I didn't really know. Um, I do think I did have like an exposure to, wouldn't it be cool to own your own business type thing, but I never really knew what it was that I wanted to do.
Mm.
And then, I mean, I'd like to tell you it was like purposeful and I have like this big
Right, right.
passion for it, but
Yeah.
really, if I'm honest with myself, I did stumble into it a little bit.
Yeah.
But you make the most of it when you're in it. And if there was something that I really feel like I was called to, like my passion, then I'd definitely go for it. But I think predominantly, I think what I've found in terms of what my passion is just being a dad.
Mhm.
So I've got a family now, and kind of happy doing what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, and that's where my passion lies, is being a parent.
Yeah, that's great to hear, that you do have something that you're passionate about, and that I mean, it's inspirational actually to hear you, um, talk about how you incorporated something that you were passionate about, that, helping the greater good and the bigger cause, and how you guys sponsor, people who are in need, through your business. So for folks out there, maybe you're stuck in a job that you don't really like, right? Because statistically, at least in the States, it's only 23% of people that do say that they like their work. So that's a big percentage that doesn't like their work. And I think it's like 24% 4% say they hate their work, and the rest just say they don't like it. Right. So that's
Mm.
still, it's still a huge number that doesn't like what the hell they're doing. And so I'm always, recommending to people, number one, trying to get a bit more control, feeling like you have control or input, or ownership of your work. And that doesn't mean owning the company. You're the owner of your company, right? It's your business.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, for somebody like yourself, yes, you can feel much more in control because you're, making the larger decisions and so on. But for, even, folks out there who are feeling like, well, they're just going there and, punching the clock every day and doing what they're told. Um, I always say to people, start out small. You don't have to, quit your job and go do something, that you think you're super passionate about and take such a huge risk. You don't know. You may end up liking your job, or at least it's much better for you because you suggested, some program, some internal program, just like you're talking about sponsoring people, right? Maybe you put together a proposal that you take to your manager, your boss, and you say, you know what, in the factory, I notice we have all these boxes all the time that, whatever we don't use or that get recycled. And I thought, I know this place that, we could take a few employees on one Saturday a month, and we could go down there and we could pack these boxes, that end up, going out to a food shelter or whatever. And, obviously it's good for the company, PR, you can use that, if you want. Um, but, it might bring some teamwork together to people. It might make them feel a little bit better about what they're doing, whatever, the benefits you think you could get out of, the program you're proposing. You still have the opportunity to be creative in how you, could potentially make your crappy work situation better. Because yes, the other bigger forces around you, such as paying for your kid's school or health insurance or the bills or the mortgage or whatever, you say, well, there is just no damn way I can leave this job. But you can potentially, make it better. So I'm just, letting the listeners know out there, it's it's not 100% certain that your job will suck forever, even if you stay in the same job. You potentially could do something about it. And for you, as a boss, as a business owner, what would you say, to employees, of how to potentially propose, something in the workplace?
Well, it's tricky because not everyone's a good manager. So
Yeah,
it may be the case that if someone was to propose something, then a manager might feel threatened by that, or they
and
might
that's
try
good
and
advice
steal it
right
or something.
there. Right, it's good advice
Um,
right there.
but if you're in a smaller company, then I actually do think you can make your job what you want to make of it. So
Mhm.
there isn't like a if an employee came to me and said, like, I found this opportunity for you to be more profitable, then I would be like, excellent,
Right,
do what makes the most
right.
the most money, or makes you more happy in your job, essentially. But if you're in a big corporate, then I would I would look at how you can get more variety into it if you don't like your life, because I do think that if you are unsatisfied, then that comes from lack of repetition, or excuse me, lack of variety and
Mm,
repetition. They're doing the same things over and over, and not being satisfied with that.
mm.
So
I,
I would look at those two things.
I, uh, I just want to get back to, your other passion that you mentioned about being a dad, because that's a huge change in people's lives, starting a family, or, having that kind of responsibility. For some folks that, it becomes a giant stressor, and can break relationships apart. And for some folks, it becomes a bonding thing. Um, So for yourself personally, if you don't mind chatting about it, because actually I was just chatting with somebody else who was telling me, well, they've been together 8 years, they have two kids, but they've lost their passion, and they're done with it for the last several years already, but they're still staying in it because of, well, they don't know what else to do, or because financially it would be a wreck, and blah blah blah, all these things. So it's like, of course I say, well, gee, think long and hard about it, because 20 years from now, do you want to be saying, shit, I wasted 20 years, and not being happy? At least,
Mm,
hopefully they'll start some conversations that may repair it or change it, or maybe it, it's time for them to change, in a much bigger way. I don't know. Up to them, obviously. But um, so for yourself, for people out there who maybe feel stuck, and don't feel like, well, this is a great thing, I love being, a parent, whatever. um you know how it, just like with the job that you just talked about, how they could do something maybe differently, in order to change that, even though they stay in the same job. What about for folks that maybe are now a parent, and or a growing family, and they feel that is the thing that is, keeping them stuck or has brought them down, or how could they look at that differently? And I'm not faulting anybody who might feel like that, because that's a natural thing. Your life changes, or there's huge amount of stress and so on, and it those things affect people in a different way. It doesn't mean that you're not a good person because you're like, god damn, I hate waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and changing diapers. No, that's not a bad person.
mm. It's difficult to know without knowing the exact
Sure.
circumstances, but there is one thing which springs to mind, which is I believe it's a Stoic principle, which is
Hmm.
negative visualization. So instead of the positive, seeing your things how you want them to be, it would be in this person that you spoke to. If he's got a wife, I believe,
Hmm.
and I would say, what happens if you were on your way home one day and you got a call and you never got to see your wife again, basically, or
Wow.
there was some instance and I don't know, you had to move and you never got to see your kids again or something. You want to
Hmm.
bet that it would be seen different um, if if that were to happen. And it kind of comes back to how we started the call, actually, which is nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And
Hmm.
I know that like if you the more vivid you get with that particular example, meaning the
Hmm.
more the example, the more you make it real, like
Right.
with details and everything like that, the more you can put things in perspective for yourself. Because people do tend to get a bit carried away thinking about how bad things can be, and then they can get completely snapped out of it by a phone call. Um,
Right. Yeah, that's boy, that is a great piece of advice that nobody has brought up in the past, doing that kind of scenario. I mean, of course, everybody, myself included, says, well, just be grateful, or just, they just realize it could always be worse, or, well, I know you don't like this thing, but what if tomorrow you find out you have a terminal illness, or, a loved one passes, or whatever it is, or you think of a bad thing like that. So it's along the same lines, but I think it's a great, it's a great piece of advice there, is to, really sit there and think about the thing that's causing you a problem. um, Turn it to, on its head, basically, and see, maybe you might miss that thing, or maybe it's not as bad as you think, if you really turn the scenario into a much more negative way.
mm.
um, well, I know we're getting close to the top of the hour here, so I really appreciate all of your time. But before we get off, I'm just wondering if there's any, thing that either throughout the conversation, or just that comes to the top of your mind, that you think might be helpful to people out there who are feeling stuck, and regardless of situation that it might be. Anything else that comes to your mind?
Well, there is one other thing which I think has been valuable to me in terms of, let's say, if you're suffering, if you're thinking about
Mm,
all the negative things, and is to categorize your thoughts by one of two things. So is it intentional thought, or is it thought which has come up and arised out of nowhere that you haven't asked for? So an intentional thought might be, I'm going to go to the gym because I have a particular goal, or I'm going to go to work today because I want to meet a particular income goal, or whatever it might be. And a thought which is unintentional or just arises may well be those inner critic thoughts that come around, and they say something along the lines of, you've never done this before, you're not good enough, or you're crap at this, or whatever it might be.
Right.
And the question is, did I choose to think about that right now? Because you can spend, years of just unintentional thoughts when, if
60
you were
to
to ask the
70,000
question,
thoughts a day, I think is the number.
yeah, if you were to ask the question of, did I choose to think that right now? Is that the best way for me to use my mind at this particular moment? A lot of the time, the answer is no. These thoughts, they just pop up out of nowhere, and the inner critic is supposed to make you feel, should we say, supposed to protect you. That's what it's there for. But because we're in a modern world where the fight or flight response is not entirely useful anymore, it can actually be very unhelpful. And so I'm always trying to think to myself, is this thought something I chose to think, or is it something that just appeared out of nowhere that I didn't have any choice in? And that can sometimes help.
And what if it is a unintentional one, and you say, well, because I always ask myself the question, is it useful? Which is basically what you're saying too. So if it's not useful, if it's not doing any good, then you don't want it to be there, right? So, but if it's unintentional, and you don't want it to be there, what do you do to try and get rid of it?
You would perhaps go back to the ways that we the list of things that we spoke about previously, which was the generalizations and the inaccurate language and that sort of thing.
Running it through the tests.
It's the facts versus opinions thing.
Right.
So the fact might be, yes, I am going to work today. The opinion might be, I'm not going to do well at work today. And so if it's a fact, then there's no getting away from that. But if it's an opinion, then we don't really know what will happen.
Yeah. I'm just curious because, this is a good thing for people to know, obviously, about your business. First off, Thomas was early for the call, which I would say that's only about 20% of the people are early for the podcast, cordially waiting in the waiting room for you, and has done research outside of what his normal work would be, in order to be prepared. So I'd say work with this guy, for your business and your digital marketing, because of those two reasons right there, number one. But I was just going to ask you lastly, if you are having those unintentional things and you do run it through the tests, and you say, okay, well, it doesn't, pass these tests, and you say, well, then there's no point in me, taking time with it. What if that thing just keeps popping back in because, you have to sit there and see your boss every day, or you have to sit there and chat with your mom every day or whatever. So it's like, it's sort of unintentional, but it happens because it's environmental, let's say. And I know, well, okay, so quit your job so you don't have to see that boss every day. Well, obviously, some of those things are difficult. So I'm just wondering, what you think about, things that are recurring, and how to try and neutralize those more.
I would maybe, depending on what it is, I'd maybe look at your early life experiences to see whether those have created assumptions and rules for yourself. Because if it is the case that it comes back up again, there's probably a reason for that. If we use the example of, so mine is, what the example I was going to give to you was that I don't like to make mistakes very often,
Mhm.
and that's a rule of mine. So
That's
I
why he
like to
researches.
prepare.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. But the reason when I did some self knowledge stuff on
Mhm.
that, it's because when I was, well, my hypothesis is that when I was little, I had a critical parent, and
Mhm.
therefore, in order to not be criticized, I better not make many mistakes.
Mhm.
And then my assumption or my rule from that is that I don't want to make mistakes. But basically, although I'm now an adult, and I haven't looked at that assumption, I haven't looked at that rule and said, is this the best way to act? I'm just living my life that way and not really thinking about it.
Mhm.
And so, a big part of my personality, maybe, is something that happened when I was a child, and I'm operating completely, I don't know, via something that was years ago. That you know, I'm not the person in control if I'm not looking back at those thoughts and those rules and assumptions that I've made about myself.
Mhm.
So I can perhaps go back and look at that and say, well, is it really the case that you can't make any mistakes? And it served me well in some instances, like the ones that you're referring to. In other
Right.
instances, like, say, for example, if I wanted to be creative, I've said
Mhm.
many times I'm not a creative person. Well, like, if I didn't want to make mistakes when I was doing something creative, well, that's
Mhm.
a lot of how creative people make great works or make great
Right.
things, is that they're just exploring.
Right.
And so I think a lot of us are just, walking around, not really realizing why they are the way that they are.
Right.
And if it's recurring, then it's probably an assumption that you learn in your early life.
Right. Well, I think that is a great piece of advice to wrap up on, and that is, that we all should take a look at ourselves, as painful as that might be, and look at ourselves from as early on as we possibly can. Doesn't matter how old we are now, but going back and examining those things, and obviously you can do that with a professional. Can reach out to a therapist. You can call hotlines or warm lines they have here in the States, which is just peer run support groups for you to chat about anything and everything. And I know a lot more of those have popped up during the pandemic times for people who are just stressed about, things that have come up due to the pandemic. So certainly research, if you're a listener out there who is just feeling like you're in the crap and stuck and, have nobody to talk to about it, or you're having a lot of anxiety about what the future can be, or what am I going to do now that I've lost my business because of the pandemic, or I can't travel, or whatever the things are. Reach out to somebody, whether it's friends, family that you might normally go to, or to a total stranger, on a hotline or a warm line that you might be able to go to. And there's lots of great, forums, as there's always been. And you'll be surprised, I think, that you'll find a place for you, that you'll find others that can relate to the difficulties you're currently going through, or they've been through them already. And they're there to help. And that's why Thomas and I are on the show today, because we're here just telling our life experiences, and telling some things that have helped us. And so I hope those things have helped you, the listener, and go back and listen to the other episodes of this podcast. And Thomas, by the way, your podcast, tell us what that's all about and how people can listen to that.
It's pretty much everywhere that you can listen to podcasts. It's Thomas
Mhm.
Green podcast, and is some business, some entrepreneurial topics, but it's also some how to do better. So it's not quite the same in terms of self development,
Mhm.
but it's sort of close.
No, that's great. That's great. So do check that out on Spotify, Anchor, just like wherever you found this one. I'm sure you'll find Thomas's podcast as well. And Thomas, I just want to say thank you so much again for coming on today, taking your time and opening up about both business and personal things. I'm sure that it will be beneficial to folks out there listening. So Thank you so much for your time. We're starting off the new year in a good, positive way. Actually, you are my first guest of the new year because the other guest that was due on today, it was their second time that they rescheduled and they were no show today. So you see, it's true what I said. Thomas is, in that 20%. So work with Thomas if you need something. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today from across the pond, as they say. And thank you to all the listeners out there for taking the time to sit and listen, and hopefully it's helped you out. And if you need some more help anytime, Rick will be here with other great guests. And Thomas, anytime you want to be back on, feel free to book again. I'd love to have you on. It's great chatting with you.
Thanks for having me. You're a great host.
Oh, thanks so much. Appreciate that. Yeah, there you go. Throw a compliment to somebody today or throw them a smile, and you'll be surprised at how you feel and the effect it has on them, because that just made me feel good. So thanks for that, Thomas. But to all the listeners out there, do have a great rest of the evening, day, morning, whatever it is. Do something for yourself, do something for others, and it will be the first step towards you getting unstuck, living happy and free. So take care, Thomas, and everybody else. We'll see you next time right back here. Take care. Have a good day. Bye now.
Bye.